How's it going, YouTube? Got FourthStarTCG here, back again. No script, no green screen, giving it to you straight facts about the Pokemon hobby. So, today we are digging into the weeds on the most expensive Pokemon cards that are in existence. Today we're talking about trophy cards and the recent, really just, I don't want to say flood, the recent discovery of a very small number of extra copies of these trophy cards that have been released. Of course, in the whole relationship of trophy cards and their sale patterns and everything, it sort of feels like there's been a lot of them on the market lately, but of course we're still talking about things like single digits. So, for a refresher, for those who are unaware or uninitiated, trophy cards are the most valuable cards in the entire Pokemon hobby. Most of your Pokemon cards in PSA 10, the most expensive sort of what we call set cards, the ones you could open out of packs, or the ones that were, heavily printed like promos and stuff. The most you're looking at there is maybe about $50,000 to $60,000 in a PSA 10 and or in a other sort of equivalent gem mint grade. Those, that's sort of what you're looking at. Charizard, the most expensive, it really drops off after Charizard. Maybe I think first edition Lugia Neo Genesis, that's maybe up there with T17 and stuff in PSA 10, in the high teens to maybe low to mid-teens to high teens in terms of thousands of dollars there. But most of your Pokemon set cards you're looking at maximum maybe a couple $1,000s in PSA 10, and everything else is below that. But these trophy cards, they're way out there. You're looking at, if you want one of the older ones from Japan, like the Secret Super Battle, the Tropical Mega Battle, the original Japanese Worlds tournaments, you're looking at close to $100,000 plus for those Japanese ones, maybe even a little more. And then there's stuff like the Pikachu Illustrator, of course, most expensive card in the hobby. One recently sold for about $230,000. There's all-day offers here in the States. That one was in Japan. Took quite a bit of work to actually get it out of Japan. There are offers in the States all day over $300,000 for a Pikachu Illustrator card. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the stratosphere of Pokemon cards here. The most expensive, the most exclusive, the ones with the lowest print numbers. Now, how you would normally acquire these cards, the sort of publicized way of distribution, was that you would win a contest. They're called trophy cards. You win a tournament, you win an art contest with the illustrator, and then you are awarded a prize or trophy card. So this is sort of how we've always thought that these cards were distributed, but the people who were in the know always sort of surmised or understood that those awarded copies weren't the only ones that were out there. Like, it doesn't make sense the way that the card printing works. You don't just print, say, for English Pika trophies, you don't just print 6 of them and then that's it for each year. So, like, what happens if one gets damaged? Do you have to go back and print a whole nother 6 Pika trophies? Or do you hand out the damaged one to a competitor who's probably worked their entire life to attain that goal? No, you can't do that. So you print more than are needed in case cards get damaged, in case there's printing defects. And what happens with these extra cards, we never really knew. Sometimes we think, okay, they go to like the Pokemon Vault where they have basically like a copy of every card. But we weren't really sure how these got distributed. And of course, it's not like these cards that were handed out illegitimately. Of course, they're still produced and handed out by Pokemon, but we never really knew where these cards ended up until fairly recently, over the last couple of years, when someone in Japan has begun selling these extra copies of trophy cards that, for all intents and purposes, it appears that they were given these cards by Pokemon. way back when, at the beginning of the Pokemon trading card game, and now they're very slowly putting them out onto the market. So Picono, this is the big person. They're really just sort of an enigma. This is the person who sold basically every major trophy card that's come out of Japan lately. And the guy, he doesn't respond to any messages. He won't answer questions. You can't contact him to ask if he's got a trophy card. It just doesn't work like that. He lists for a price. You either buy at that price, no questions asked, or that's it. So he's listed a ton of cards. He sold the Pikachu Illustrator that I just mentioned for $230,000. He sold stuff like Snap cards. I think he's got some Neo trophies listed, TMBs, SSBs, basically a smorgasbord of the rarest and most expensive Pokemon cards that have ever been printed. So it's really exciting to see these cards come to market in a sort of different way than what was previously thought. Everyone thought, okay, in the past you better track down a winner, which especially in Japan, very difficult to do. Japan culture very different, don't like to sell these kind of things, whereas here in the United States, you know, everything does seem to have a price every now and then. So now that we've sort of gone over the story of, you know, what trophy cards are and the recent rise in these extra copies, I want to talk about the trophy card market sort of reaction to these cards, how people see them, the sort of positive reactions and the negative reactions, and do a little digging into each side there. So the positive reactions are obviously people saying, you know, oh, this is fantastic, we have more trophy cards, you know, the opportunity to purchase is there. Because the biggest thing with trophy cards is not necessarily the price. Like, once you're talking about a $200,000 Pokemon trading card, the people who are buying a $200,000 Pokemon trading card probably doesn't matter if that price is $200,000 or $300,000. Once you get up into that level of income and discretionary spending, when you've got that money to spend, the price doesn't necessarily matter all that much. What matters is the opportunity to purchase at something, you know, relatively reasonable. Like 200 to 300,000, that's not too big of a difference, but you know what, you want to buy Scott's PSA 9 Illustrator on eBay, you probably, I don't think he'd let that go for less than $1 million or something. So, you know, that's kind of something you'd be looking at. That's when that difference comes in a little bit. But when you're just talking about, if you're talking about like $100,000 here and there, these trophy card people, it's not, you know, and it's similar for the lower end trophies. People who are spending $80,000 on a Pokemon card, probably doesn't matter if it's $100,000 or $120,000. Just that kind of stuff. So the price on these cards, it's really not all that crazy, and the price really doesn't matter too much. It's so much more about finding someone who's willing to sell and getting that opportunity to acquire that card. Because, you know, like the Pikachu Illustrator, when there's, you know, I don't know what the confirmed distribution number, you're probably looking at, you know, under 50 copies, maybe a little more. When you're talking about 50 copies of one card in the world, you know, and a card that was released way back in the late 90s, you know, price is kind of not a big deal. It's just acquiring the card. So this opportunity to acquire the card at any price, even if it's $230,000, it's great for people who want to collect these cards, for people who have the opportunity to do so. And sort of the market has really responded well to these extra copies. It's kind of interesting because it's difficult to say that the price that a Picono trophy sells at is like a market price, just because of the difficulty of getting one of these cards out of Japan into the Western market, where the majority of this trophy card market is it's in the West. Middleman, normally these are posted on stuff like Yahoo Japan, where it's exclusive to Japanese people. You need a Japanese bank account to open a Yahoo Japan account. Like, the middleman sites won't let you bid over, I think the limit on Bai is like $9,000. I think there's a limit on Zen Market as well. That's another big middleman site. So you have to actually have a physical middleman in Japan who's willing to transfer these massive sums of money. And it's very difficult. It's not easy. You have to have some big cojones to put your money into something like one of these trophy cards. And a lot of the time there's no buyer protection. We've seen fake trophy cards go up for sale on Yahoo Japan. If you get bit by one of those, good luck. You better hope you did something via PayPal, because that is quite the way to get scammed on something like that. So it's incredibly risky, and that's why it's sort of like putting a market value on these prices that Picono sells them for. That's why, probably just about a month or two ago, that illustrator sold for $230,000 in Japan, but there's offers above $300,000 all day here in the US, and even those $300,000 offers, no one's biting on those. So just to give you an idea of where the actual value of that illustrator is, a lot higher up than the last sold. So the market really hasn't made any sort of distinguishing. So the market hasn't really distinguished between these extra copies and the ones that were awarded in the traditionally publicized manner. There really isn't. As I mentioned, the main thing that matters to trophy card collectors is acquiring the card, not necessarily acquiring the card that was distributed in manner A as opposed to manner B. And when you're buying a trophy card, if you want that trophy card and you don't have unlimited funds and unlimited time, you're basically going to have to settle for whatever copy is available, whether that's one that was given out to a winner or whether that's one that was distributed to a Pokemon employee. So the market really hasn't distinguished at all between these varied methods of distribution, and of course there's no way to determine just from looking at the card what the method of distribution was. As I said, these cards are legitimate. They're cut from the same sheet pretty much. So it's not really useful or possible to distinguish between the cards if you just held them up next to each other. Now there's been some people who have been saying that they value the method of distribution and the provenance of the originally distributed trophy cards more than they value that was sort of handed out to a Pokemon employee. And you've got to be careful here, because the people who say this also sort of say things like these copies that were distributed to Picono, the Pokemon employee, they're illegitimate. They're the same as the Card House EU horde of illegally obtained and illegally printed Gold Star dogs. They sort of make these comparisons that really aren't necessarily true. So it's important to sort of distinguish between the perfectly fine opinion that I don't like the method of distribution, and if I could purchase one of these trophy cards, I would purchase the one that was handed out to a winner, versus sort of talking about these cards in a way that isn't compatible with the way that they were distributed. So again, these extra copies, they were distributed by Pokemon in an intended method. This employee didn't steal the cards from Pokemon. They were given them by Pokemon, likely as a thank you for working on the original Pokemon trading card game. Or they just sort of picked them up along the way. you know, there's no indication that these cards were stolen. There's no indication they were printed illicitly or without Pokemon's approval. And just the numbers that have been popping up, you know, it's probably likely that Picono has a couple copies of each card. You know, they don't have a full sheet of illustrators sitting around. It's just not something that happens. They don't have a binder of SSB trophies like the ridiculous Gold Star dogs that were printed. So making these comparisons, you got to be careful. Because you want to separate opinions, such as, you know, it's perfectly fine not to like the copies that Picono sells, but it's a different thing to sort of make this argument that the cards are illegitimate, which, you know, even if they were, as we've said previously, the market doesn't care. These cards have been selling for the exact same as any other trophy cards. There's been no premium for these copies that were distributed to a winner. But before we sort of wrap up, I want to talk about how interesting this is and what this sort of says about the Pokemon card market and what collectors need to keep in mind going forward. So people think that, and we've seen this in the past, that people think that Pokemon has only printed a certain number of cards, and they distribute a certain number of cards, and the only way to acquire those cards is to get in contact with the people who they were distributed to. So Pokemon does these kind of card promotional things every now and then, and people need to sort of realize that things are a little murkier than that. So, like, for example, with the Art Academy cards, the English Art Academy, there was a winner, the Primal Kyogre EX winner, who apparently would not sell any of their cards. They would not even open their case of cards that they were given by Pokemon. They didn't want anything to do with it, thereby making a complete Art Academy set impossible to complete. Or so people thought, because just in the last couple of years, you know, Art Academy, I think it was 2014 or 2015, early XY, mid XY. So some copies of this Primal Kyogre X surfaced, and everybody sort of went crazy. They were like, how did this happen? How did these cards come out? I thought the winner wasn't going to open. But these cards were extra copies that were obtained by a Pokemon employee, and then they decided to sell them. So it's, you know, people need to realize that the way that Pokemon says that cards are distributed is not the only way that these cards are distributed. So while 6 of any Pika trophy are distributed each year, there's probably more of them printed, like we said earlier. And if you want to obtain those cards, getting one off of a winner is one option, but there may be other methods of distribution as well that you might need to look into. So this is not something that is unique to trophy cards. It happens with these Art Academy cards, these limited production run cards. So if you ever win one of these things and your goal is to ferret your winnings away in your closet in hopes that you'll open it in 50 years and your cards will have gone major stonkers, maybe not the best idea. So thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Be sure to like and subscribe and stick around for more videos.